recording from the Main Street Studios in District 58 in the beautiful city of Lonsdale. I am producer Matt V, and I bring to you Senator Bill Liskey and Representative Drew Roach. They will bring you news from the legislature and in their district, along with great guests. All right, so let's get to it.
What's up, Bill?
Welcome back, Drew. This is great times.
Yeah, good time.
It's been a long week and a half, 2 weeks here.
Yeah, beautiful Sunday afternoon here.
It's very nice outside.
Almost, 50-some degrees out?
Oh, let me see. My watch says 48, so
That's close.
pretty close.
You know, snow's melting.
I mean, we had 4 feet of snow on the back ramp back here, and it's pretty much gone.
Yeah,
So
spring's coming. Love it. All right, well, let's get into it.
yeah,
Let's see here. Last week, we had, I should say 2 weeks ago, Thursday, we had a bill come on the floor. A little drama behind it, right? We're talking, and this is the House floor, House File 21, Robbins' bill.
yep,
There was some amendments brought forth.
yeah.
One of the amendments brought forth was an amendment to delete all and to add in my bill, the Never Again Act.
Well, there you go.
You know, obviously there was some games being played there by the Democrats to try to, put me on the spot, create some division within the caucus, and it was quite interesting, right? Quite interesting, and essentially what they wanted us to do is to go against the speaker.
Yep.
And cause some issues. And I know there's some liberty-minded people that were second guessing and expecting a different outcome. The reality is the Never Again Act is still in committee, and I expect it to have a fair shake and have an opportunity for that bill to go forward. With all due respect to Representative Robbins, her bill is a better bill than what we have in law. It does limit the governor's powers. In my opinion, it doesn't go as well. It's not even my opinion. The fact of the matter is, it doesn't go as strong as the Never Again Act, and that's one way to go after it, or one way to look at it. So I respectfully supported her bill, as I would hope that she would, support my bill, and other members. And so we'll see what happens. But my bill is the Never Again bill that I'm the chief author on. Again, the Never Again Act, is going through state committee, and I expect it. Expect Chair Nash and the other members on that committee to vote that bill forward and get an opportunity to move itself in the direction that it should.
I agree. Being one of the chief authors over in the Senate with the same Never Again Act, working on it myself, there are always room for improvements. I think the one thing that is important to understand for all the liberty-minded folks out there is that we do have to be careful on some of the language that we choose to use. And I think yours is getting a great shake. I think it's up to Representative Nash to continue to let you work on it and get it better. And I would hope that you get a vote on it on the House floor soon. Of course, in the Senate, we're never going to get a hearing. We're never going to get anywhere with it, but at least we're trying. It's pretty funny, and it would be without question something, as Senator Wiesenberg brings up, is we all have these wonderful things called cell phones now. We don't need one person to make all the decisions in the state of Minnesota, because we can all communicate within minutes. And if those things are going down, if we can't communicate that quickly, there's a lot more going on in the state of Minnesota than what we want to talk about. And the emergency powers aren't going to be the solution.
Yeah.
We're going to be needing to respond to something much worse than at that point, and an emergency response isn't going to be the answer.
Yeah.
I think Representative Robbins, her bill is it's a decent step in the right direction, especially with the new amendments right on the floor. I know that the first discussion was the 2 weeks is too long. It sounds like she moved it down to 10 days.
Yep.
She also made it so that you can't recall immediately, do another one, do another emergency power grab after the first one has expired if it's for the same reason.
Yep.
So big adjustments to her bill as well.
Correct.
Um, so
Exactly. So I just, for all those liberty minded individuals out there, the supporters, just know that my principles have never shifted and have never changed, and I will continue to be a liberty minded representative in the House that is never in question. It will never waver. Okay, so that needs to be the first and foremost, most important thing that you know, that I'm always supporting liberty and will continue to fight for liberty, no matter how it looks on the House floor. Right.
yeah,
The reality is I am, uh, as well as Bill, and a handful of other members, will always be fighting for that. So if there's ever any doubt or any questions, I'm always available. I'm always open, and I'd love to have talks with anybody that maybe questions that. Right?
absolutely.
So that's the first thing and foremost. So the Never Again Act is not dead.
It's still moving.
It's still moving, and it will have its day. So just wanted to start off with that.
Sure.
Um,
So why don't we talk about the other freedom loving and also, protecting of our state? I think I'll set you up for this really nicely. Is It's called Defend the Guard. It's basically telling the National Guard that the duty is to the state of Minnesota, not to war. So why don't you explain it, Drew, and talk about why it's so important?
yeah, well, the Defend the Guard again is another important piece of legislation that, in reality, we shouldn't need. We shouldn't need it because the Constitution, you know, essentially should already prevent members of the National Guard to prevent them from being deployed to fight in foreign wars. But the reality is Congress hasn't really acted that way for decades and has sent our men and women off to fight in wars without Congress's approval.
Right.
And so what this reiterates is that it needs to be that Congress needs to do its job. Okay, and it's unfortunate that we actually even have to have this legislation to reiterate that it's already in the Constitution. But if that's the route we have to go, that's what we're going to do. And so, when I was running my campaign, I talked to huge supporters, people that are pushing the Defend the Guard across the country. And if I'm not mistaken, it just got passed in the Arizona Senate, so it's getting a lot of traction. There are members in within upper parts of the government, like Pete Hegseth, that support it. Tulsi Gabbard supports it. In that, we shouldn't be sending our National Guardsmen over to fight foreign wars. So I am very proud to be the chief author of that Defend the Guard bill in the House. I know it's gotten some pushback, and there's been some, I don't want to say fake news about it, because that's not the case. I think there's just been some misunderstanding of the bill.
Absolutely. I think the number one thing I hear is that they're worried about it defunding our National Guard. And I don't see how that could happen.
Yeah.
Reading through the bill, it's not asking for defunding of it. The whole purpose of the National Guard is to defend the nation, not to go out and fight wars in other countries. There's other military related members that are actually meant for that type of behavior and that type of action. And the National Guard is just not that. That's not what they're for.
Correct.
They are here to defend our country. And it does not mean that they have to go and fight over in foreign wars.
Yeah, and I think Minnesotans and Americans have made it very clear we're sick and tired of being the bullies of the world. We're sick and tired of seeing our men and women die for bullshit.
Yeah.
We're sick of it. We don't need our sons and our daughters fighting wars that we don't belong in. That doesn't mean we don't support our allies. That's not what that means. That means we need to stop killing Americans for nonsense. And hopefully, no matter where you sit on that side of the argument, as far as the Defend the Guard and what you believe or what not believe, the most important thing is it goes through committee. We have conversations about that, and we get the correct information about it. And we try to do the right thing and moving that bill forward. And if other information comes forward that that states that they don't get the funding, that's something that
Then we'll
okay,
have to modify the bill,
then we'll
right?
we'll modify the bill and we'll have those conversations. But to just
To shut it down before we have the conversation is
just
not okay.
to shut it down and just make blanket statements about it and to paint it for what it's not is not how we should be legislating. And so I am again proud to be the chief author of that. I hope I can get some more support from other House members in that bill. I think I will. I think as more information comes out about that and people start hearing the truth about that bill, I think some of their hesitations will be minimized, and I think they'll start coming to the
Sure.
realize that the Defend the Guard is a very good legislation, and that we should be supporting it because it protects lives is what it
Well,
does.
like I said, if I go too far, I'm not the chief author in the Senate. Senator Wiesenberg is, and he's very knowledgeable on the bill.
Yep.
The other thing that's really important about the Senate version is it's got massive bipartisan support. When you have Senator Fate and Senator Wiesenberg working on a bill together, that's an indicator of a good piece of legislation.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. I mean, those are
They're very polar opposites most of the time.
two people on opposite sides of the spectrum, in the political spectrum. So the reality is this is a true bipartisan bill, which it's refreshing that we can try to have those bills come forward where we can work with the other side of the aisle and have a common ground of like what we believe in, right? Because those are
Yes.
doesn't happen very often.
No, and it's I like how you're leading right into another beautiful segue. The one thing that I think we've gotten really good at is segueing, and so another area of bipartisan support, our district especially this is going to be very important is data centers, the discussion of data centers.
Yeah.
I've still got on my bill this SF 608. So if any of you want to go back and read the wonderful Senate File 608, wonderful bill to read. Took a lot of work. The idea of it is threading the needle, finding the way to both support the industry of data centers and support our local residents in Farmington specifically, and other areas around the state of Minnesota that could be positively affected by the bill. Senator May Quade's my second on my bill.
Yeah, that's
So,
crazy.
Her and I politically very much opposite sides of the spectrum, but there are things we can agree on. And this is one of those areas too, is that data centers in the state of Minnesota, I found out some information. You and I got to do a joint meeting with a Freshwater Minnesota, I think is the name of the group.
Yep.
And they came in and they were giving us a perspective on water usage for data centers. And, the number one concern is how much water they use, how much water we may or may not have in the city of Farmington. And in their opinion, their professional opinion, which they have a good knowledge base on water. I'm going to tell you right now, that's what they do.
It's what they do. Yeah.
Their concern is that Farmington is not a good area for the water usage that Tract is coming in with as a proposal. So it's pretty concerning from the environmental side. It's not something that I first rush into. I don't normally jump into the environmental pool too often. I do want to protect our environment. I do think that we need to keep our state as happy and healthy as possible. And so when they brought in the information of how much water they don't have in Farmington, it'll be interesting to see how this data center moves forward. But the things that we were talking about is, where they're going to build it is right next to the Vermilion River.
Yep.
It's interesting to know that the Vermilion River is the last suburban or urban river with trout.
Yeah.
It's the last one in the state of Minnesota. That should say something. We should be paying attention to what's going on. And, the other question is, energy usage. So to give an update on our bill, we had a hearing scheduled. We had it pulled. There's lots of reasons behind it. Unfortunately, money generally talks. And the more money you spend, the more likely you are to get what you want. And so that's kind of where we're at the moment. But I was informed on Thursday that Senator Nick Frentz will be taking charge on the hearings for data centers specifically, and that'll be going through his energy committee. So it'll be all about the energy and water usage. So
Yeah, I mean, and so I know I will be having a committee hearing on the data center bill as well. So that is something that's been talked about. I will have a hearing. So we'll at least have that discussion,
Good.
right?
Yep.
Because we need to have it. Again, whether or not it goes forward, I'm not sure. Obviously, there's been some um, pushback on that. We've got some big groups that are against our bill, and that makes the pathway forward much more challenging. But the fact that we're having these discussions at a much broader base, and people are starting to understand that, although as a state we really could use the tax revenue that data centers bring, we need to be informed of how data centers can have some negative impacts on our daily lives, both in energy usage and energy cost.
Right.
Because the reality is with the 2040 carbon free initiative that the liberal trifecta brought forward in Minnesota under the Walz administration, and the continued increase of electric vehicles in Minnesota, what's not being talked about and what's not being taken into account is the aggregate usage of those data centers and how that's going to affect the meso grid, and
Right.
how that's going to affect our daily lives and the cost of energy. And so to slow down a little bit, and although we, again, I'm not anti data center, but being smart about it and making sure that we're doing it in a way that doesn't negatively impact the lives of the residents of Minnesota is something that we need to talk about and have genuine, real conversations about. And so there's a lot of things that Minnesota as a state, uh, policy wise, that we need to rethink. And one of that, I think the most important thing outside of the water is the fact that we need um, to end the moratorium on nuclear energy. I mean, that's just the reality. The 2040 carbon free initiative in Minnesota is a disaster for both the private industry and residents. And if we can't have those genuine discussions, we're going to be in a world of hurt here in 10 years down the road,
and the
if,
thing
if not sooner.
Right. And the thing that I'm most worried about is that, the 2040 plan, whilst, valid or arguably, worth it, I like the idea of clean environment, clean energy. I'm not opposed. I'm not opposed at all to the idea of cleaning up what we use for carbon. Great. Fine. If that's the argument that we want to have. But again, like you brought up, what sources of energy are we going to use? And I can just tell you right now, just solar and wind will not cut it.
No.
They can't support our current grid, much or less a grid that might double with the number of data centers being proposed.
Yeah.
So nuclear is going to be a huge discussion, and I think that's something that hopefully Senator Frentz will be open to talking about on the energy discussion. I'm hoping that we can get that discussion happening in the House because, in all honesty, unless we remove the moratoriums around nuclear energy, we'll never reach our goals.
Yeah.
Lofty goals, in my opinion. I sometimes call them rainbows and unicorn farts. That's how we're going to power our grid if we continue down this solar and wind only option.
Yeah.
And so we have to open the discussion. And if we don't, we're just not going to make it.
Yeah. And I would say the members on the left, I was in tax committee, and there was a bill that was brought forward that was, essentially providing sales tax exemptions for data centers to help the industry. And although that might be good in a sense of, you know, opening the door to have these data centers come into the state and have these proposed jobs, or excuse me, these proposed plans come forward and create data centers. The reality is, I don't know if sales exemptions are necessarily the most.
Well, and that's what's already in place, right? That's why data centers are pushing so hard to come to the state of Minnesota, is that there's a lot of exemptions and a lot of benefits, tax benefits for them. But those were made back, in the early 2000s when
Yeah.
that legislation existed because data centers were the size of the building we're sitting in, not data centers the size of 2 million square feet. Like
Yeah.
that's just, they're not the same.
Well, that bill brought forward is to just extend that and actually make it even more sales
And
exemptions.
see, that's just crazy to me. I don't know why you want to do that.
as a residential user, so one of the things in that bill that was brought forward is that data centers wouldn't have to pay sales tax on their energy usage.
Well, yeah, but that passes it on to you and I.
Well, exactly. And as a resident and a consumer of energy, we pay about 6% sales tax on our energy consumption. So
Right.
although we do want private business and we want these big businesses to come in, is that really the right thing to do? Is to say
Wouldn't it be the other way around? I'd rather them pay the 6% and we as constituents don't pay that.
absolutely?
You
I
know,
mean,
that's so weird that it's coming from the left. Normally that's how they would approach it, is what I just said. You know, they would say, "Hey, let's make the corporations pay and let the local residents not have to pay anything." But
well,
that's not what they're doing.
well, yeah, and so that specific bill had bipartisan support, and so
Sure.
I would just say to those members on the left that are looking for those sales tax exemptions, great. You should also be leading that discussion. You should be leading the discussion in your caucus to end the moratorium on
Nuclear energy.
nuclear energy
Sure.
because they go hand in hand.
Absolutely.
And so, that's kind of what's going on with the data center bill. Again, so to wrap that up, we'll all be getting a hearing here in the next couple weeks. But there's also some shenanigans going on with Farmington, as we've seen.
Yeah, we have. And,
And
you know,
it's
let's draw that a little bit to the attention, but I'm going to let those people tell their story to a degree too. I think they're
sure,
doing a great job. They're bringing it forward quite regularly in the Star Tribune, and honestly, it's going to hit the news, I think, some more here.
yeah,
But when the city is paying someone to covertly go into a group and listen to their private ideas, their opinions on what's happening, and then report back to the city so that the city can stop them before it even happens,
yeah,
that's not okay.
yeah, not
And
okay.
and so, to those of you that participated in that behavior, please stop and also realize there are consequences for what you've done. And hopefully, those consequences are served.
Yeah, I mean it's so unethical and so it's wrong on so many levels. And it's just disappointing to see elected officials and city administration that were involved in that, um, because that's not what your role is. That's not what your
No,
duty is. And so, Farmington's got a lot of things to clean up, and I hope they get their act together because as a resident, it's really frustrating to see how that's being played out. And I hope the council and again the city officials um, do the right thing
right.
and hold those members accountable because it's absolutely disgusting what happened with those residents of Farmington.
Well, and it's hard for me because the reality is I wouldn't have gotten involved if they would have done the right thing from the beginning.
Absolutely.
I had no reason to want to enter into this discussion, but once my constituents were calling me and telling me how no one was listening to them and that no one was giving them a voice, I had to get involved because that's my job.
Yeah,
My job is to give them a voice.
yeah,
And
and it's
so, I know there's people mad out there about me, stepping in and participating in this discussion. And it's like, I wouldn't have gotten involved if things had been done the right way the first time.
yeah, and some of those emails that were discovered by some of the residents showed that seems like Angie Craig's office knew what was going on the whole time.
Well, that's not good. That's
Yeah,
not good at all.
interesting. What do you know?
So, well, the other thing that happened at the Capitol this week was a pretty big deal.
Yeah,
We
huge deal. I
we
think it's
had a
probably.
we had a huge vote both in the Senate and on the House floor.
Oh, we had a special guest that came to
We
the.
did have a very special guest that came, Riley Gaines. Riley Gaines was in the Capitol on Monday. It was a good time. I got to meet her. Proud father of two girls, one being in hockey and the other one's talking about doing some sports here next year. So she's just getting started. It's a big deal to me. My daughter, she's 7 years old. Her birthday's in August. She turns 8, and she's been playing hockey. And the number one thing she talks to me about is whenever we go to a game, she goes, "Are the boys going to be playing at all?"
Yeah,
I mean, that's literally the first question out of her mouth because
yeah,
she practices with boys, which is fine. She can handle that. But when she goes to play a game, she knows that she would rather just play with the girls. She knows that. At 7 years old, she knows that she just wants to play with the girls. And the reason she wants that is because the boys, they're more aggressive. There's no doubt about it. Don't get me wrong, there's girls that are aggressive in hockey, but they're not the same. It's not the same situation. And so at the age of 7, she's already asking those questions.
Yeah, it's sad. I mean, that should be the last thing on her mind.
She shouldn't even have to think about that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I mean that was a really good day as far as um, you know, getting behind Minnesotans across the board. I mean, what
More than 70% of Minnesotans
Yeah, I was gonna
have
say
responded to surveys saying that they do not support boys in girls' sports.
yeah, correct.
And that's saying something.
Yeah, in the fact that the left is doubling
They double down.
down.
Yeah, they
They
just double down.
double down on this ideology. It is absurd to me that they cannot and refuse to speak the truth, and they continue to gaslight Minnesotans and live in this fallacy land that they live in. One of which was a member. I don't know if you can get
Hang
that.
on, let's just play a little sound. This is how we lead into liberal tears.
Yeah.
You and I got in a lot of trouble. Let's bring up the article. I think let's point it out.
Sure. Okay, you were gonna go with that one first.
Let's go with that
That's
one
fine.
first.
Okay. So, yeah, this is funny because the Minnesota reformer in this.
And this is based on the votes on Monday because we had a Senate floor vote about trying to get it so that only girls can participate in girls' sports.
Yep.
And the same thing happened on the House.
Yeah, and this lovely journalist Michelle Griffith, she's got it out for me, man. I tell you what.
She's a little mad at you, I think.
She's been mad at me. She wrote an article about me as a new representative. She could have gotten actual information because I didn't respond to her email because the Minnesota Reformer is a rag publication. Yeah, you heard it here. It's a rag publication. They're full of crap. All they do is put out nonsense and trash.
At least they were nice enough to quote our podcast.
Yeah, but I'm just not, it's trash. And she put out an article about me. Well, first of all, Deanna Winter put an article out about me last, February, which was a rag article, nonsense article. And then that was regurgitated by Michelle Griffith earlier this year. So I'm never going to talk to the Minnesota Reformer. So if they're watching, which we know they are.
Because they linked to our show, which was nice of them.
Don't reach out to me because I'm never going to speak to you because you're not actual journalist. You are employed by a rag publication. So keep continuing to spew your lies and your nonsense and continue to, propagandate and put out false information. But the reality is they wrote an article last week in response to the besieging. I think that's what it said in the headline of Representative Lee Finke sought to make Minnesota safe for trans people. Now he's feeling besieged. Sure. Okay. And in this article, it goes down to say Representative Drew Roach, that'd be me, and how I've made, I can't read it exactly because it's nonsense, but how I've made rude remarks.
You were misgendering and criticizing.
Yeah, well, boys have penises, as we've all seen before. The kindergarten cop, boys have penises and girls have vaginas. So I live in reality and not fantasy. Okay? Nor will I ever. This is a biblical argument, not a feelings argument. Okay? So the reality is I made a comment, and I will double down on that comment. And what they did is they shared our podcast. Thank you. The views of that podcast went through the roof. We appreciate that. Whether, clicks don't have feelings. So whether you like the podcast or hate the podcast, go ahead, watch it. We appreciate it. We love it. We enjoy it.
We enjoy talking to you and giving our perspectives. It's pretty unfortunate that we are now getting in trouble for saying our own opinions on things when this individual gets to say whatever they think and however they feel.
Correct.
It's a weird situation. It's like we get told that we can't infringe on their free speech and how they feel. But then the moment we express how we feel about something, we get told to stop talking.
We're pulled into the principal's office, and I wasn't told that I couldn't say anything.
No, right? Neither was I. But the reality is, it's the fact that we even got pulled into the principal's office. is kind of crazy.
But making the comment that I did would be possibly an HR issue, which I disagree with. This is not an HR issue.
Well, we're both not on the clock right now.
I'm not on that exactly.
I'm not at the Capitol. I didn't say it on the Senate floor. I didn't say it in a committee hearing. I'm pretty sure I'm right to talk about whatever I want to.
Yeah,
not at work.
absolutely. There's no
Even if I'm at work, I should, in
Yeah.
theory, be able to say whatever I need to say.
yeah, there's two genders, male and female, and that's it. Like
That's as simple as that gets.
I'm not gonna live in a false sense of reality.
Well, and the other question is, like, not to quote Walter, because I know Walter and I and you and other people have differing opinions on a lot of things, but Walter said it great on the House floor the one time. Your reality does not have to be my reality.
Yeah.
Your fictional reality does not have to be my factual reality.
Yeah.
So
And you're not gonna sit here and make me acquiesce to your beliefs and try to pin me into an HR dispute because I have a set of beliefs and you have a set of beliefs. If you want to live your life and have a false sense of reality, good for you. Go ahead.
And that's
No
the joys
one's-
of the First Amendment and your freedom. Go ahead. Your constitutional Bill of Rights are just like mine.
Yeah.
But you can't infringe on mine just because I don't agree with what you're saying.
No one's stopping you, right? Do what you want to do.
You're
But
an adult. You go be you.
Correct. 100%.
So, and I think that's the libertarian in both of us. Is like, at the end of the day, I don't care what you do behind closed doors. I don't care what you do to yourself. That's on you.
Absolutely.
But
I
don't expect me to change who I am for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I am not going to be pressured or, forced into a set of ideology that I do not and nor will I ever agree with because it's a biblical argument. You want to live your life through the views of a secular world, fine. By all means, go ahead, do it. It's your right. But I refuse to live that way. I
Right.
refuse to have that set of ideology.
You
and
also
that-
shouldn't have to accept it.
No, absolutely not. So that's that. The Minnesota Reformers, a rag publication that continued to.
That continues to. Maybe
Yeah,
our iPad's not working today.
it's all good. It continues to just whine and cry and make it seem like we're bullies.
There we go. We got her working.
And,
Oh.
I mean, how could I be a bully? I'm like 5'2".
I don't know. You might
you
be the size
seen-
of my thigh.
Have you seen Finky?
Yeah, taller than me.
He's a big man.
Yeah, well, big person. I'm going to say person. I'm not giving a one way or the other at this
Whatever. Big guy.
point. So
With that said, let's get in back,
let's kind of circle back into
back into the girls' sports and pull up that other clip, Matt. If you can get it, I'll give you a minute. But this is the gaslighting and the
Well, this is the same situation. We got another person who lives in their own world and their own reality, and this is their situation about House File 12, which is making girls be able to only participate in girls' sports.
correct.
And sharing as I have other times, standing up on other bills that have come before us, that as the first of many to come non-binary representatives in Minnesota, and as the only two-spirit representative in Minnesota, but also the country, that's a stark contrast to what we are doing here today and what we're talking about and what we're grounded in. And it's incredibly humbling and grounding that as we started tonight, we were led in prayer by somebody that I hold very dearly, and so does our community, in high regard, and look to as a two-spirit Ojibwe elder. You maybe saw me shedding some tears tonight, because for me, that was a first, that I wasn't the only two-spirit that I know of in this capital. She also spoke to us in Ojibwe language and shared some words, and one in particular that got me, when they said, Gijawena. To us, that's a word that we sing in ceremony, the Kanigana. We say, Odena, Odamen. And that means that you are loved and you are sacred. You are medicine, which is what two-spirit, trans, and non-binary people are, especially our kids. And so I think it's a reminder for us that in a capital that was not only made not for us or by us, but meant to intentionally exclude us. And we've emerged from every attempt by our government, I call our hitman, that has forced to push us down and erase us, that we're still here with a playful wagging of the finger. As politicians and unelected billionaires, from the White House to here in the Minnesota House, we're seeing this doubling down of efforts in an agenda of division, of stoking fear, of stoking harm on our communities. We know that many people say that they just don't know trans or non-binary people, two-spirit folks, that once you get to know us, we're actually pretty great. I think there's members on your side who spend a lot of time with working on bipartisan bills and just connecting with, that you've gotten to know me and a glimpse into who I am and the communities that I'm here representing.
You can pause real quick. By no means do I think that they're bad people.
No, not at all.
By no means do I think that they are, whatever their perception of how I view them is, it's wrong. Okay. The reality is I just don't have to live my life believing what they believe in. That doesn't mean that they don't have the right to feel that way. That doesn't mean that they don't have the right to believe that. But what conservatives have a problem with is when that gets fizzled into the life of our children, brought into the life of our children, and taught at the school level. That's our problem.
And we heard them say just now. We just heard again. I don't know proper pronouns. Don't really care. We heard them say that the trans is medicine for us. Like no. There are studies coming out that are saying that gender dysphoria is, and it always has been and always will be, a mental health disorder.
Absolutely.
And that they are now learning that the treatment of by mutilation, for lack of a better term, is actually making it worse, not better.
Yeah.
It's not helping.
Yeah.
If it were helping, if you could scientifically prove to me that these individuals were actually better off than they were when they started, if you could prove that to me, I might start listening. But the problem is we have evidence showing that these individuals become more suicidal.
Yep.
They become more reliant on medications, and they become more of a burden than they were when they started.
The reality is they're
not that they're a burden.
Yeah.
Because again, I don't want to talk about it like that.
They're going to continue to feel that way because they'll always feel that way, no matter, in my opinion, no matter what they do, because they're relying on their feelings. They're relying on me to adhere to their ideology to have their feelings feel better.
Well,
and that's not going to happen.
Well, and that's just it. That's the hardest part about this whole situation, right? Is gender dysphoria is a mental health issue. There's no question about that. The question becomes, how do we help them through their mental health issue?
Yeah.
And currently, society is now telling us, this is just from the left, of course, not from the right, but from the left side of the argument, we just need to accept it. We just need to accept it. That's how we help them. We help them by accepting everything. Well, if someone's bleeding out, do you just accept them for who they are? Do you just accept that they're going to bleed out, or do you try and save them, or do you try and help them? I mean, at what point do we make the argument that we need to help them in a different way? Do we start to realize that they're crying out for help in certain ways, and it just, we need to find a different way to help them?
Yeah. Well, and what we didn't see in that clip is the fact that representative equated us trying to take boys out of girls' sports to genocide. Okay? So the mass killing of Jews in World War II was genocide. Conservatives and Minnesotans alike that don't want boys playing in girls' sports is not genocide. And that argument is so far out there that you can no longer hear their argument because they gaslight and they perpetuate such a false sense of reality that it takes away from the actual discussion.
Well, let's see if we can get them to say it for us, because that way we're not taking words out of their mouth. We're
But
not
with over
changing it.
241 attacks on trans and queer folks and using the government and courts to bully and blame us for problems that were created by corporate greed on trans people who make up 1% of the population, of people who are not the reason that we can't afford eggs or why our rent is too damn high.
That was liberals.
And we're facing an era of anti-trans violence that is born of the playbooks of the colonial violence used against two spirits right here for over 500 years to reinforce the gender binary and use colonial powers to do it. Our US and government systems literally created residential boarding schools to solve the Indian problem. When efforts to assimilate Native adults faltered, they turned to children. And I'll connect the dots here because we've talked about this, but you have to understand why this is deeply connected to what we're talking about tonight. Because the first children that they came for were two spirits and trans kids as the target.
Trans kids didn't
And
exist
so
until
while
recently.
two spirits and trans folks like Sharon Day right here before us, like myself, like our kids around the state, in the country, are held in highest regards as visionaries, leaders, name givers. These roles and people are important. We need trans and two-spirit children to become trans and two-spirit adults because they are the ones that lead us in our puberty ceremonies, in name giving, who pass on our culture and our ways of being and knowing.
The hell
And
is
it
she
was
talking
only when
about?
European colonizers arrived that the idea of two genders were even imposed on us. First, to diminish the voice and roles of women, and second, to vilify people whose genders were not man
Wait a
or
second. So
woman.
we're giving sports.
We have never
Hit
been
pause
a
just for a
problem.
second, Matt. So we're gonna put boys in girls sports, and that's or we're taking boys out of girls sports, and that's allegedly minimizing female voices.
Correct.
What?
They
I just-
live in a fantasy
That's
world.
so backwards. As you can hear, I mean, this person, we don't even need to get to that point. You know, transgenderism was used against other people. Creating their ideas that they are transgender helped both create them to become sterile so that they wouldn't reproduce, and it was a mental warfare game. So to assume that this is something that is supposed to be happening is incorrect.
Yeah.
You go to the history books, you look at what the last time we put a whole bunch of kids in places like what this individual is talking about. The last time we did that, we tried to convince them that they were the opposite gender just to mess with their head.
Correct. It's a direct attack on the nuclear family to stop the traditional the cycle of a traditional family so we can reproduce and push the word of God, right?
Right.
That's what this is all about. It is this is a spiritual fight. This is a biblical fight. This isn't a fight of flesh and blood. It's a biblical
It's a mental warfare.
It's of biblical proportions, and they try to, use feelings and fallacy and this nonsense to create a culture divide to, again, disrupt the traditional family. And that's exactly what this whole thing is about, and it's absurd and it's nonsense.
Hey, but
I'm
hey,
just
you know,
so
one thing-
sick and tired of this bullshit.
Right, but one thing we can agree on. One thing we can agree with this individual on. Schools are indoctrination camps. That's what she just said, right?
Yeah.
Or am I hearing it wrong? Did I hear it right or did I hear it wrong?
You heard it right. They make the argument themselves for education freedom.
Right.
They make the argument. They want school choice, or what I call education freedom. They just
It's just
they
funny
just don't want to
because
say it out loud.
well, they just did. I mean, they just did. They just said that we're indoctrinating children. Well, if that's the case, where's the school freedom? Where's the school choice?
Yeah. Nowhere should kids be learning about transgenderism or being reaffirmed transgenderism in school. Period. It doesn't belong there. That's our whole argument. This is why we get pissed off. You want to be a transgender? Be a transgender. Keep it in your house. What you do in your box is up to you. I don't give a shit. But when you bring it into the schools and you start conditioning my kid, now you got me pissed off. They don't need to know about two spirits. It's not a thing. God.
Well, so long story short, we'll shorten it up a little bit there. You know, it's pretty sad how they always twist it to their message. You know, it's always twisted. It always gets twisted. Another perfect example is, you heard it there first. Well, we're blaming the federal government. We're blaming the public, the House, and what we're doing here on the House floor today matches with what the federal government has been saying for the last few weeks. Well, you know what? It's funny because they're going to use that in reverse here in a second with the next thing we're going to talk about. I'm gonna change subject. We're gonna move on to the next thing, and that's let's bring up that next clip about the deficit and how we're gonna blame someone else because we were in a
The
balanced budget.
surplus, we have a stable economy, and we have the strongest budget reserve in the state's history. It tells us that in Minnesota, we have made sound decisions. We are good fiscal stewards, and we are in a strong position to face what lies ahead. Minnesotans elected us to take on challenges, to tackle hard conversations, and find creative, meaningful solutions. We together have faced worse economic positions in the past. With strong leadership and the contributions of hardworking Minnesotans and the economy they create, we have turned potential deficits into surpluses. But never in our history have we had to do that work up against a president who seems hell-bent on crashing the American economy. Only one thing has changed since the November forecast, and that is the inauguration of President Donald Trump.
Only one thing.
At least she
changed.
acknowledges
In the
your
last
president.
50 days, the stock market has tanked, and more than 170,000 Americans have lost their jobs. In Minnesota, his recklessness has shrunk our state surplus by $160 million. Trump
Or maybe it was the
and Elon Musk
$113
are
million
bragging about their
loss that they
chaos.
found from a
They're
decade ago.
causing it, and my Republican colleagues here are standing with him, cheering them on, and in some cases hiding from the public.
All right, hit pause. That's good
Trump?
enough for that. Yeah, we are standing with Donald Trump.
Absolutely.
You know why we're standing with Donald Trump? Because he's trying to fix and right the ship. We've been in this disaster of a budget, this headlong rush into a deficit for a heck of a lot more than the last couple months.
Yeah. $18 billion surplus, and now we're
We're
going
heading into a $6 billion deficit. I've
Yeah.
been there for the last 2 years. You know what I said? Every single bill that came forward that was going to cost us money? How are we going to pay for this? We still don't know the answer to that question because guess what? We're just going to keep raising taxes.
Yeah.
That's the only thing they have.
Yeah, $18 billion surplus, increased yeah.
Increase taxes by $10
$10 billion,
billion. So there's $28 billion, which, by the way, that $18 billion is such a farce, right? So we were actually at a $21 billion surplus when I started in 2023. The governor changed how MMB reports the surplus by cutting out inflationary cause. So we reduced the surplus from 21 billion to 18 billion by simply changing how we project budgets, by saying we have to subtract the inflation. Well, of course, with wonderful President Biden causing an inflationary nightmare, we then have that budget disappear just by inflation. So we literally go from $21 billion, nearly $21 billion in surplus to 18 without even doing anything because we changed how we calculate our surplus. Then we throw in the spending, the crazy, willful, wanton spending of the Democrats. We throw in the fact that we're going to raise our taxes by $10 billion, including, by the way, if any of you have gotten to renew your tabs this year, which I have already on all of my vehicles, through the roof costs. Way more expensive than last year. It's just going to keep costing more, by the way. 160% instead of 120%. It's just, we just keep upping the numbers. It's silly. But throw in all that, and then they have the gall to blame President Trump, who's been in office since January 20th.
Well,
We're just crossing the threshold of 2 months. We're not even there yet. 2 months, and it's his fault that we're at a $6 billion deficit. You know what? It was 5.2 in November. It's 5.8 now. That's a $600 million change. And I can tell you right now, President Trump is not the reason for that $600 million change.
nope.
Not
at
even a
all.
little bit.
It's the wasteful spending of the Democrats nonstop. They just want to spend. We've got, fraud through the roof in this state. We spent $760+ million on a damn palace instead of, putting the money.
You mean like you're talking about your wonderful new Senate or House building?
Well, yeah, it
State
won't be
office
there.
building.
It's not.
It won't be there when you're there. Unless, of course, you keep going.
Yeah. Well,
It's
it
not going to
won't-
be done by the end of your first term. We'll
yeah,
just put it that way.
It won't be done for what, 3 years. Right now they got me in a cubicle smaller than your LA's cubicle.
Well, I know that's what's funny is wonderful Caden. He's a good kid, but he used to work at the house, and he said, "Man, I got a whole bunch of space, and I don't have to run."
Yeah.
You know what's really funny about that?
If I fart in my cubicle, my colleague smells it.
From two
That's a
cubicles
problem.
over.
It's a problem.
You know what's also kind of funny is I laugh because so we're going to spend probably close to $1 billion on that new state office building. Take a guess at how much you think that Senate building cost to build.
I don't even, it's a nice building.
It is a nice building. Yeah, there's a couple of errors. There's
You-
some room for improvement.
You
but
had told me before. I forget.
it's only $90 million.
Oh, it's nice.
It's cut off a whole zero.
It's nice.
Cut off a whole zero.
He's got a couch in his office.
Yeah, got a 6-foot couch in my office.
Sick.
You know,
That's plenty of room for
Drew,
me.
Drew's that's the size of Drew's bed. That's all he needs.
I get a pillow in there and everything. Nice.
It's a little uncomfortable for a guy who's 6'2" to sleep on it, but that's all
Lucky
right.
You. Jeez, taking naps in between committees.
I was going to say he doesn't have time to take naps.
Well,
So-
when you're at the Senate floor so this was funny. End of the year last year, 72 hours straight. I was awake for all but like 3 hours of that time. It was a wild ride. And the 2 or 3 hours that I was sleeping was on that couch, very uncomfortable. But
Yeah.
with that being said, it's pretty scary that they're out here already diluting and being delusional about how they want to blame Donald Trump for our deficit. How is it Donald Trump's fault that you guys spent more money than you ever had? And then the best part is every hearing I've had in the Senate pretty much is all about money bills. We need $1 million here. We need $500,000 or $1.5 million there. We need $3 million here. We need some of these bills are going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and I'm over here like,
Nothing.
how are we going to pay for these things?
Yep, we give out all this grant money and hand off money to these special interest groups, these NGOs that then create a PAC and kick it right back to the
Well, you
the
heard about
powers that be.
You heard about the I think it's $2.5 million that they want to spend on a private business to build a brewery.
No.
Yeah, there's a bill introduced in the Senate.
Oh, interesting.
Oh my gosh. I think Alpha News broke the story on that one. Just a wild and crazy thing. It's like, how many times are we going to give out free money from the state of Minnesota to build their own,
Yeah, it's kickbacks. I mean, you scratch our back,
we'll get you.
We'll find a way to give you money for whatever said group that you have, right? I mean,
Yep.
you name it, the organization, the nonprofit always has got a nice, warm, fuzzy title, right? Like,
Oh, always.
it's like, well,
SaveThePitBulls.com.
yeah, how can you go against that, right? You hate dogs.
Do you hate pit bulls? No, actually, I love
You know?
pit bulls. I had pit bulls. My wife's favorite dog growing up was a pit bull. Her and I got to share our wonderful, wonderful puppy for a long time. Unfortunately, he got sick and had passed away, but we had a pit bull. We've
Yeah.
had 2 pit bulls.
I think one of the groups is and I don't know what the group is, but they're seeking $9 million in grant money for HIV awareness. I think we're all aware of it.
I think we all know it exists.
We all know. Magic Johnson taught us in the 90s about AIDS. Okay, we're aware. I watch commercials.
I don't know anybody that doesn't know what it is. at
I
this point as
see
an adult.
commercials. Whatever we're streaming, and like every other commercial is a pharmaceutical commercial about a drug that
helps.
helps with HIV.
Yep.
They know we don't need to give $9 million of grant money to create the awareness.
But we just need
of
another
AIDS.
commercial. Man, those $9 million commercials. We just need another $9 million for another commercial.
Gosh, it's annoying.
It's always interesting, isn't it?
so we need to stop. We have a spending problem.
We have an
Okay.
open checkbook, and we need to stop it right now. Representative Munson, former Representative Munson, brings up a great point. He asked me, he asked everybody on his page, what would you ask an upcoming gubernatorial candidate? A couple of questions. And I just said, hey, we need to get back to what works for Minnesota, not a one-size-fits-all approach. And his
Yeah.
concern was, well, are you talking about making more legislation? I go, no. Hang on, let me fix that statement. One size fits all doesn't work. We need to start repealing stuff.
Yeah,
We need to start going back to less regulation.
correct.
There's things that are important to have regulation. There's some other things. There was a bill that I was working on with Senator Wiesenberg, and Senator Bolden's the chief author, and it's about saving people from scuba diving deaths.
Yep.
that's an area where regulation might be necessary because someone doesn't know about it.
Yeah.
But it's not because the government needs to save them. It's that there just needs to be information on these things.
Yeah, and I have no problem with new legislation if that legislation opens up, job opportunities and deregulation, right? Like,
Yep.
I think we need to be creating legislation that one is liberty minded, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It continues to protect our civil liberties, but two also opens up revenue streams and opportunities for businesses to grow and make money and incentivize people to grow their business and bring new business in. And that is legislation that we need in order to allow people to provide a living, make a living in this state, right?
Absolutely.
So I just it gets just can't believe the left and the circles that they continue to just run around in and perpetuate this spending and
That's-
fake
it's the constant-
ideology that it's always Donald Trump's fault.
It's the constant, it's not my fault.
Yeah.
You know what? It is. It is our fault. I'll take blame for this. I voted as much no as I could, but I also didn't have the extra vote. I didn't have anybody up there to help me
Yeah.
with it. So, and I was incapable of convincing the other side to slow down.
Yeah.
So that's my fault. I'll take the blame.
Sure, I don't blame you. I mean,
I know
it's-
you don't, but
it's-
there's part of
there's only so much you can do, right? There's only
Right.
so much one rep and one individual can do, and if you're in the minority,
Yep.
there's not much you can do. There's literally not much you can do. I mean, aside from
I can show up and push no, and I can talk about why it's so bad. And
Well,
that's about what I can do.
and aside from educating the constituents and the voters of Minnesota to be involved, to be informed, to push back on those legislators that are pushing that initiative and pushing that spending. I mean, really, outside of that, there's
There's not much more I can do.
not much.
But at least
really-
I'm doing it.
Yeah, and it's and that's part of the reason why we do this podcast is to keep our constituents and Minnesotans informed of what's going on and how we see it, and if that it motivates you to have your voice be heard and send emails and get involved, and then it's all for
Yeah.
the right reason.
This is a perfect opportunity. What you just said there is really, it's important to talk to us so that we could talk about what you want to know. Matt's still waiting. We're waiting on people to participate. Send us some emails at minnesotalibertynetwork@gmail.com. Send them to Matt. Matty V will get us the questions. He'll make sure that we answer them on our podcast. So on the next episode, hopefully we have some good questions. And we will definitely be happy to answer anything you guys want. We want to hear what you want to hear.
Yeah, comment on
Comment on this show. Comment on past shows. Give us ideas. Give us what you want to hear.
Yep.
Next episode we're gonna have a little bit more talk too, because Tuesday is gonna be an important day.
Yep.
It's Paul Wickstrom, right?
Paul Wickstrom. Yep.
Paul
that
Wickstrom
is
for House District 40B.
40B.
Make sure everyone that's listening and watching gets out. Tell your friends that live in that area to go out and vote. Vote for the Republican Paul Wickstrom.
I mean, we could essentially be partaking in political theater the rest of the session, at least in the House.
Well, that's how it's going to be the rest of the session for everybody.
Correct. With the tie, 67-67, it's going to be really hard to pass anything because it's going to be lukewarm legislation.
Well, let's hope we can get it down to a bare bones budget and no more growth and get out of there.
Or if we win, we can really
We can actually make some cuts.
we can at least start doing some things in the House, moving it over to Senate, put the pressure on you and your counterparts, Julia Coleman and those.
Well, more importantly, our counterparts, the Blue Dog Caucus.
We know Julia Coleman's for keeping boys out of girls' sports. We know that.
We do know that. She's a very strong advocate on that on Monday.
She was front and center on our
So
press conference for the House on
well, so hopefully you guys can get that bill actually sent over to us, and then we can have a real vote.
Yeah, well, let's just hope. Let's hope that we win on Tuesday. Paul Wickstrom. I shouldn't say we, but let's hope Paul Wickstrom wins on Tuesday. I think he's a really good candidate in that district, and if anybody can do it, it's Paul. Again, it's going to be an uphill battle, but boy, if we can do that, that would be.
I think it'll be a statement to Minnesota.
It will be. It will be that will really say a lot. I mean, if that doesn't wake up, if we win that seat and that doesn't wake up Democrats and they continue to double and triple down, I mean, they are so out of tune
Right.
with the reality. I hope that would be the case. I mean, they already are out of touch. I mean, they see what's happening on the national level and they're continuing to double down on their, agenda and their initiative. But it would be more interesting to see if Paul wins on Tuesday and Republicans have the majority in the House, if those members, my colleagues on the left in the House, continue to again double and triple down on what they've been saying for the last handful of years, it would be absolutely delusional and tone deaf. So we'll see what happens. But
Well, that being said, we'll see you next time. Please send us in emails again, Minnesota Liberty Network at gmail.com.
yep.
Have a
Thank
great
you
rest of
guys.
your day.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.